Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and you're listening to In the House. Thanks for joining us. This is actually a special episode of In the House. It's an impromptu episode. We just finished up recording a plumbing episode, and this morning we showed up to work, and we're here in Utah, and we're having earthquakes up north around Salt Lake, Ogden area. Started with a 5-point whatever earthquake. I felt it all the way down here in Orem at the office. The building was moving, plants were shaking. It was an interesting feeling. I've never been in an earthquake. And when things like this happen, obviously the number one thing that we think of is being safe during the earthquake, as far as not being harmed by anything falling. But after that has subsided, now the earth was just moving. The house was just shifting. There are some things in the house, and I want to make sure that people know here are some things that you can go around and look for just to be safe and make sure that things are okay. And at any time, if you feel like something isn't okay, call a professional, call the fire department or whatever if you're concerned about things like that. But let's talk real quick about some things that people can do or look for around the house. I'm joined. Thanks. I'm joined right now by the plumbing managers at Any Hour Services. I've got Dwayne, Ricky. Scott is going to be joining us here in just a second. He actually just stepped out because he's walking someone through how to shut the gas off to their house up in Ogden, because that's one of the things that we're going to talk about here. But anyway, so guys, talk to me about what are some of the things that we can look for around the house to make sure that we don't see any obvious signs of damage.
I think first thing I would do is to go down into the mechanical room, into the basement where your water heater, furnace, and things are located, where the gas is coming into the home and venting is leaving the home. I would probably see if you have any smells that's not normal down in your area where those units are. You can see signs of some older homes have hard piping coming in for their gas and their water lines instead of the newer versions of our flex lines that we use regularly. And if you have a hard lines coming into your water heater, you might see some seeping or something from any of the joints. And then, of course, your gas lines coming into the house to your units. Nowadays, when we're out there any hour, we install the new flex lines up to code. However, some of the older homes that might be hard piped, you might smell some gas, and maybe some of those joints that haven't been moved in a long, long time could have shifted. Most of the units nowadays per code have the seismic straps, earthquake straps, as they call them, on your water heater. A lot of homes don't have those. So that would be the first thing I would do, Mike, is go down in that mechanical room and do a visual of your gas and venting and things like that. So
go down and make sure that something doesn't look out of place. First, go in and utilize your senses. Smell. See if you smell gas. It would smell similar to if the oven was left on. You would smell that. They add a smell to the gas so that there is something that you smell if there's a leak. And then look at the water heater itself. Ricky mentioned the earthquake straps. Those are there because those things are a tower, and if it starts to move, it can wobble back and forth. And if it's hard piped in, meaning rigid pipe, the connections nowadays, they're flex to give a little bit of movement there in case something like this happens. But look for water spraying, look for water leaking, running down the side of the tank. Look at the joints. You mentioned the venting. That's another thing. While the water heater is working, make sure that vent is still connected to the top of the water heater, and then follow it up and make sure you're not seeing things disconnected, or you make sure it looks like it's intact. And then, again, like smelling. Now, if we do happen to smell gas or see water leaking, we're going to talk about what you should do, because there's two main shutoffs as precautions in the house in case any of this happens. That's your main gas shutoff and your main water shutoff. Dwayne, can you tell us where are some of the most common places that we would find those?
Yeah, so typically here in Utah with the basements, the water line comes in somewhere into the basement, generally from the street side. And so it's always good to know where your water shutoff is. Teach your kids where the water shutoff is. If you got kids that are home babysitting and things, because You never know, like we talked about the toilets, you never know when something's going to happen, and it's a good thing to know where it is and actually exercise that valve once in a while to make sure that it'll move when it needs to move. And so generally speaking, it's somewhere. Sometimes they come in under stairs is a real common place on our ramblers, on our split level homes that we have here, a lot of. And but somewhere in, sometimes they're in an access panel. Sometimes when they remodel, they got buried behind the wall by drywall. So sometimes we don't even know where they are, but it's good to know where that is. If there's something with the water heater, there's usually a shutoff valve right above the water heater that'll shut off the cold water to the water heater, and then that also shuts off the hot water as well. Gas, if you do smell any gas, and this one kind of goes back and forth, honestly, on whether the gas company actually wants you to go out and turn the gas off. A lot of my career was spent in California, and it kind of went back and forth over the, do you do it, do you not? Obviously, if there's definitely something, you definitely want to call the gas company, tell them it's an emergency. If you smell gas, probably want to get out of the house, that kind of a thing. But the gas meters are usually on the front corner. If you do have a wrench or something like that and you do decide you want to turn it off, there is it's called a flathead gas valve, and there's a little rectangular shaped thing on there that you put a crescent wrench on and you can turn it. And when it's straight up and down, the gas is on. When it's sideways or at 90 degrees sideways, the gas is off. But it's usually on one of the front corners of the house, sometimes on the garage side, sometimes on the other side.
Okay. Any other plumbing things that they would need to just check and make sure? You mentioned earlier, Dwayne, walking around, just giving a visual on the outside of the house and checking things. What would they be looking for?
Yeah, it's just take a walk around the house. Our sprinklers aren't on yet, so that's not necessarily an issue right now. But when the ground shakes, things can settle, things can move at different times, and it can cause some issues. But just take a walk around the house, see if you see any water coming up. There again, that water main comes in from the street, from the city, and goes through your foundation. And so the ground outside could be shifting and moving at a different rate than your concrete foundation does. And so look at those areas and just see if there's anything happening that looks out of the ordinary. Check your windows and doors, look and see if there's, chimneys or one thing that's affected on these, especially the older homes with the unreinforced masonry chimneys. So you might just look up at the roof, see if everything looks good up there, and just do a visual inspection all around your house.
There's one more thing, Mike, on some of the older homes. They have galvanized pipe coming from the city meter into the house, and it might not.
Talking about for water?
For your water,
okay.
Coming from the easement out at the street, okay, where it enters your home and then runs through the valve, the shutoff that we talked about trying to locate and know where it is for emergencies. However, that galvanized line on some of the older homes, it could shift, and at this point today, it could just be trickling underground. It's good to probably do a preventative walk around the house in the next couple weeks as well to see if any of that water can be percolating up next to your home or out in the yard. Sometimes it takes time for it to get up 4 or 5 feet from the frost line.
Makes sense. A couple other things, because we were just recording a plumbing episode, but we have HVAC technicians and electricians here as well. As far as the HVAC goes, wherever your furnace is, which probably is in the same mechanical room as your water heater, go to where that is and check the same types of things. You want to smell and you want to look at the venting, make sure that it is attached to the furnace, and that a lot of times the way that the venting will work, if your gas furnace and your gas water heater, if they're both venting out, sometimes they'll come to a joint vent. Make sure that those connections are still together. And if you notice any of this stuff that's out of place, you obviously, if you can shut things off like the gas and the water, but then you want to call the gas company, call the fire department or whoever you need to for emergency services. If you are worried about anything with the electrical, if you notice sparks anywhere or things like that, you want to look for your main electrical shutoff. Houses nowadays, most of them have a main disconnect outside where the meter is or where the bulb is, where it reads how much electricity you're using. If you have one of those, open that door and you're going to shut that main. You'll usually have 100 or 200 on it. You'll kick that breaker off. If you do not have one of those, because some houses are older, the wire comes directly into the meter bulb and then goes into the house, go to wherever your breaker panel is and shut those off. If you feel like there's something going on, get out of the house, call people. The last thing, we also have a drains department, a sewer department, and those sewer lines, those main sewer lines that connect to the city, they're underground. And just like Ricky was talking about with the ground shifting and moving, if you have an older sewer line that has started to form cracks or at the joints, it's possible to get a partial collapse or something like that. So if you, as you're going on using your plumbing, if you start to notice backups, if you have a floor drain and you start to see some water coming up, or the toilets are backing up, or water's coming up in the showers down on that main level, stop using that stuff and call someone to come out and, maybe get a camera and inspect the line and make sure you're not having, a bigger issue with that. But, are there any other things that you guys can, I know this is an impromptu, you guys weren't ready, but is there anything else that, people could look for or look at to make sure things are working the way they should?
I can't think of anything at this time. Just be aware of your home and what's going on around you, and just pay attention. Yeah.
And, be safe at a time like this. Reach out to the people that you know and love. Make sure sometimes when things like this happen, it's not always about the physical damage that's done. A lot of times there's some emotional stress and distress because we don't know what to do. It's unknown. There's a lot of stuff going on. And then all of a sudden the earth starts shaking and we start, we start freaking out a little bit, if you get woken up to the ground shaking, you're like, what's going on? So, check in with the people that you love and make sure that they're doing all right. If you do notice anything around the house and you would like to get, an electrician or a plumber or someone out there to take a look at it, feel free to give Any Hour Services a call. We're here to help you if we can. Or if you live outside of Utah, reach out to a service company. They're available and willing to come and help you as well. So anyway, that's it for this little impromptu episode. Scott, I know you you just you walked out and came back in. Thanks for, did they get the gas shut off?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So we should be good.
Everything's good there. So anyway, thanks so much for watching and for listening. Stay safe out there. I'm your host, Mike Wilson. You've been listening to In the House.